Money FM 89.3, the best of the afternoon update. Viewpoint.
President Donald Trump's media group, of which Trump owns a majority stake, is partnering with Singapore-based crypto exchange Crypto.com to launch crypto-friendly investment funds later this year. The Trump Media and Technology Group plans to launch a series of made-in-America exchange-traded funds under the brand Truth.Fi, working with Crypto.com to supply the tech and tokens, including its own currency, Kronos. The duo plans to create a series of exchange-traded funds or ETFs and other exchange-traded products, which are expected to roll out across the US, Europe, and Asia later this year. The partnership puts Trump's media company in business with a company that was recently in the crosshairs of US regulators. The tense back and forth between Crypto.com and US regulators has since cooled following Trump's return to office. Now, with regulatory attitudes shifting and political connections deepening, what does this mean for the future of digital assets in this region? Joining us to break it all down is Van-Petersen, managing partner at Ascent Capital, an executive strategic advisory specializing in digital assets and more. Welcome, Kay.
Hey, great to be back and in the studio,
yes,
in the flesh.
Great to have
Old school.
In the studio with us.
Yeah.
Kay, so tell us, what is the significance of Trump Media and Technology Group partnering with Singapore's Crypto.com?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like, this is probably something where 12 months ago, if you even suggested it, maybe not even that long, people would have laughed you out the room. Like, what are you talking about? A sitting president in the U.S. partnering with a crypto company based out of Singapore? Never going to happen, not in our lifetime. So I think it's just that kind of clear shot at this asset class is here. There's no more kind of disputing that. Doesn't mean that there's not a lot of issues that we still need to kind of work with. But I think structurally, it's just this milestone of this is real, this is happening, it's going institutional, a regulation is kind of coming in. And guess what? Singapore is also part of that, crypto kind of global map, which I think is a very bullish thing. Right.
Kay, as I mentioned earlier, Crypto.com was locked in a legal battle with the SEC just months ago. How do you interpret this sudden shift in the regulatory tone since Trump returned to office?
Yeah, so, I've done everything on the finance side, investment banking, 120-hour weeks, bottoms up, but I'm really a macro EM boy at heart. So top down. And I think you have to realize, just like in life, you go through different regimes. That's the same thing from governments. And we're emerging out of a regime that pretty much has been there since Obama. So we're talking 2008. That has been pro-government growth, very heavy on regulation, very constrained in regards to innovation and kind of pro-business, and very combative in regards to digital assets. And I think like most things, it starts from good intents and then it just kind of morphs into much, much bigger kind of friction and bottlenecks than could have been envisioned. And I think that's the paradigm shift that we're seeing. And we're seeing a lot of paradigm shifts today in the world, AI, which hopefully we'll dig into later, but also with this administration. So this administration is literally night and day in regards to their North Star from the previous one. We're probably going to see more evolution, deregulation, and grounds made in the next, 3 years, so i.e. the 4 years of this new administration, than we've seen in the history of crypto and digital assets in the U.S. And that's a huge, huge, huge aspect, and great for the space, great for builders in the space, and great for blockchain capabilities.
But what does the Made in America angle mean for this partnership, and how might it appeal to global investors, particularly here in Asia? Yeah,
so I mean, listen, let's cover it. Like, very few things in life are all positive and all negative, right? And, I'm a massive crypto bull. I was the insane guy talking about Bitcoin in like 2013, 2014 in the corner of the room, right? And what we've seen is huge strides in regards to like regulatory adoption, institutions coming in. We're talking people like BlackRock, with 12 trillion assets under management. This is not a drill. But at the same time, we've also seen many nefarious moves coming also from the Trump camp itself, right? Where we had meme token launches with the Trump token, the Melania token, which actually have been very detrimental, at least, since they happened earlier this year, to the altcoin space. So it's just to also point out that there's a lot of stuff that's happening that's absolutely not on point and in kind of, I guess you could say, the healthier aspects of the space, if that makes sense. So I think this is natural kind of evolution. There's very kind of positive aspects, but there's also some aspects where we just need to kind of upgrade how things are kind of done. But I think this is also will happen naturally with regulation and more institutionalization.
Okay, Kay, how has Crypto.com established itself in the U.S. market for the benefit of our listeners?
Yeah, so, Crypto.com is kind of, one of the OGs on the exchange on the crypto side. If you watch basketball, Crypto.com kind of arena at one point. I think what they're basically doing is facing up with an administration that is pro-crypto, pro-digital assets. They are from the U.S. To, I think, also one of your earlier questions, this made in the U.S. is confusing a lot of people. So what does that mean? If we have a Singaporean token that's, made with builders here, does that take as much precedence as if we did it in the U.S.? Clearly not, right? So it's a lot more pro if you're building out of the U.S., if it's, let's say, a token that has roots in the U.S., and there's some of those, for instance, but less so if it's something else that was maybe, built out of the U.S. So, for instance, ETH, which is the second biggest digital token, is not considered a U.S. kind of, token, where something, let's say, like Aptos is, for instance. So, call it favoritism, but it is kind of what it is. It's a little bit of like the theme in regards to what they're trying to do with this administration, America first. And like anything, there's, collateral damage depending on what side of the fence that you're on, right?
You're an industry insider. So what do you think would have been Trump media's consideration when they decided to work with Singapore's Crypto.com?
So I think it's a function of a few things. One must be naturally relationships with the founder, who, we know has been at a very close dinner, literally sitting 2 seats away from Trump. That shows you how tight it is, right? This is not like through intermediaries. He's definitely in the room with the decision maker. I think it may be a function of also, a jurisdiction diversification kind of play, not having everything necessarily kind of onshore in the U.S., which I think is bullish for Singapore, for instance. And it probably kind of goes back to kind of relationships. But I don't think one can argue like it has to be their unique tech or anything kind of like that. Like there's a lot of amazing exchanges out there. And I think one thing we should also note is there's going to be tons of consolidation in these crypto exchanges, right? And there'll probably be an edge for U.S. domiciled or at least U.S. Operating in U.S. regulatory exchanges rather than not. Right.
I think things are going to get really exciting from here, Kay. How could this collaboration, in your mind, influence crypto adoption in Southeast Asia? And what role will Singapore play in perhaps facilitating the broader adoption of crypto?
So I think Singapore is basically just turning into a hub in the sense of this is where you have your headquarters, right? But the front lines in regards to the troops and the talent is probably going to be spread out across the globe and Southeast kind of Asia. What I'm hoping we're going to see more of is more real-world use scenarios rather than, I think, a lot of these Mickey Mouse meme tokens or SpongeBob SquarePants meme tokens, as well as kind of utility tokens. And let me just riff on that a little bit. When crypto and digital assets started, like anything that's new, there's a lot of regulatory uncertainty, right? It's just like we've seen this many, many, many times because it's too small to be taken serious by the regulator. So the people who are operating it, they're not exactly breaking the rules, but they're not exactly in the clear, right? So it's a gray zone, which, everyone will say, well, that's how you operate in China or Indonesia or Russia, man. What are you talking about? Right? Because you can literally see like a conflict of rules depending on who you're speaking with. But just going back, so what that made, what happened is in the evolution of the space, if you and I had an idea, what we knew for sure was if it was a security token, i.e. if we were, let's say, launching a company and there was dividends to be paid out, as soon as we did that, then it was going to be treated as a security token. Same would be a stock or a dividend bond or a bond or coupon. And that would put us in the regulatory crosshairs. So that's where people morphed to these utility tokens and these meme tokens where they weren't getting a distribution. So I think one of the good things that will now happen in the space is it will be clearly a regulated security token. And now all of a sudden you're not buying something with some hypothetical payback or getting even more tokens, which is actually the wrong thing because it's more concentration risk. It'd be like, you know what? There's this real world asset of a string of portfolios of properties. You get 10% a year yield, and you get that paid out in stable coin or fiat. And it'll be just like another yield asset that you'd get anywhere else, except it's better. Why? Because it's all on the blockchain. So you can see all the cash flows live, the balance sheet, everything. And actually, that yield should trade tighter than in kind of the traditional kind of Web 2.0 world. Right?
Okay. Let's get down to specifics now. I want to know more about the potential for these Made in America investments. What can you tell us in terms of the specific Made in America crypto projects or ventures that could benefit from this collaboration?
Yeah, so, I mean, I'll give you an example. And this one is actually, funnily enough, one that is family related. So I have a cousin who's, one of these like aliens on paper, like, math Olympiad, graduated at, 6 years old, whatever it is. It's pretty kind of insane. So, just one of these off the chart, super bright guys. And we caught up in Singapore at the token event last, I believe, September. I think we had like 25,000, people here in Singapore for that. And what was interesting was he was looking at Abu Dhabi in regards to his latest kind of venture on the crypto side. So they're basically doing an exchange. I don't want to say it's like necessarily a copy-paste of what Hyperliquid did, i.e. Hype, but it's called Lighter, I believe, or Light. He's going to crucify me for not even knowing the name. But the main point was he was originally looking at Abu Dhabi because, again, this was pre-U.S. elections.
I see.
But now with this new administration, he's 100% onshore, right? So he's keeping everything domiciled in the U.S. And doesn't need to, quote unquote, have a jurisdiction kind of hedge, which is basically also how Singapore benefited before. So it's actually bullish that Trump is doing stuff with Crypto.com that's here, right? Rather than, let's say, focusing on, let's say, just a Coinbase or a Kraken, for instance. So I think that's an important kind of aspect to take away. In regards to actual specific kind of U.S. tokens, I'm not so sure if I'm so comfortable playing that because this whole world liberty media and Trump kind of media, like, I don't like the vibes of how they're going about doing stuff, if that makes sense. I'd rather focus on independent U.S. builders who are doing real stuff in crypto, who are building real kind of companies, and let's say focus on them, right? So this actually may mean that you're not buying an actual token, for instance, right? But you are backing a fully kind of blockchain kind of empowered, AI agent focused kind of play. And one thing I'll just kind of add to that you're seeing in the space for the first time. So what would be normal is you and I would jump on a call. Let's say we're investing, whatever it is, $25,000, $50,000, per crypto startup. And literally we're in these calls. You're not even seeing the profile of the person. There's no LinkedIn. Like, there was so little to be able to do your data analysis. But like the space was so hot, like it was just kind of take it or leave it. And what would tend to happen is you'd be looking at projects and there's maybe one or two people who are really exceptional and you just really have no clue about the other ones, right? So, of course, the only way you could control your risk was by how much you were investing in, right? So classic kind of almost venture kind of play. So, we have $100 million to allocate or whatever, but you're only doing, 3%, 2%, right? But now what's happening is really fascinating, is you're getting talent that is just as good to work anywhere. Like we're getting people who've worked at Tesla, who've worked at OpenAI, right? Who've worked for some of the best kind of companies. They're fully doxed, i.e. they're not hidden, right? And they're coming in and it's just a very different caliber. And it's almost like, the grown-ups are coming into the space, if that kind of makes sense, right? And these folks are not messing around. They're going to be eating people's lunch. Like they came to win, right? And remember, it's crypto, right? It's 24/7. There's no 9 to 5. There's no Monday to Friday. And I think that's exciting. And the majority of these folks are not creating another meme coin or another kind of layer one. What they are really focused on is on the agentic and the AI movement side of things. And that to me shows you, okay, maybe this cycle is still early. Maybe this cycle is done and we can chat about that, right? We've obviously had a big correction on BTC from 110,000 to, I think 76,600. We're sitting today about 10,000 higher at 87,000. And I think when you start to see that caliber of talent coming in, that's a really positive thing for the space because it just upgrades the entire space as a whole. right?
Coming back to this partnership, do you think it will help attract new investors to this space, or do you foresee some skepticism given the controversial nature of Trump?
No, I mean, I think it's a little bit of both. Like, I think, there's... So let's, even if we go back and we play on what happened with the Trump token and the Melania token, right? Initially, when the Trump token happened, people were obviously shocked, right? Because it was before he got inaugurated. And the bullish arguments were, wow, everyone's now going to know what crypto is, right? Because you had literally people going up who'd never opened an account. And I think I'm paraphrasing here, but if I recall correctly, we had maybe 5 to 6 million new crypto accounts opened up, right? Who would never have done it kind of before. And then the space was like, okay, wow, this is big, this is bullish, and expecting big things. But then as soon as they released the Melania one, then it was clear like this was just a grift, take as much money as possible from the people who can least kind of afford to kind of give it. And I think it had kind of the opposite effect as a whole. But I think net, the direction is positive in the sense of as it gets more regulated, then you and I as institutional investors can now participate, right? And we can even now write bigger checks. We can even do bigger backings. We can now also say that we're openly doing crypto, openly doing blockchain. This doesn't happen overnight. People always like to quote Silicon Valley and Palo Alto, just like they like to quote Singapore as being a beacon in the world. But Singapore also didn't happen overnight, right? So this is at least a few cycles still to kind of play out. But I do think the speed of what's going to be happening is going to be huge. And like when I speak to my cousin, yes, if you get on X and crypto Twitter, I mean, people are depressed, right? Some people are sitting on losses of 80%, 95% because that's what these things do. But the builders are really excited. The builders are very excited because they have regulatory clarity. They know where they sit. They can plan for the next 3-5 years. And that was something that was very, very hard to kind of do before, which was built for the long term. So we're only going to see an upgrade of things to kind of play out, right? And, just to mention some names, Ondo, real world asset token backed by, BlackRock, as I said, 12 trillion kind of asset manager, Acolyte AI, something that I personally hold, where it was just like dream team coming through. I couldn't believe it was happening, right? So, by all means, there's so many other kind of tokens, but my main point is you're just seeing instances of teams that you couldn't see kind of before. And I think that's positive. Right.
Okay, you mentioned a little bit about technology earlier.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking, what technological advancements do you expect or foresee coming out of this partnership? Could we see new crypto platforms, perhaps blockchain
100%.
Solutions or other innovations as a result?
100%. I think one of the hardest things that crypto has had and still has as an issue today is mass adoption. And the reason is, for mass adoption, the UX, the user experience has to be seamless. And I'll tell you something, even for me, and I'm considered an OG because I've been in crypto for so long, I don't really think of myself as one. I'm not sitting here with, billions of dollars, right? I know just enough to be dangerous. But what I will say is, even for people who've been in the space for a while, it is still a pain to use, right? So let's say, you and I are sitting with a crypto portfolio, and then we want to buy, a token on the Solana network, and then maybe we want to switch it for something on the Hyperliquid network, and then we want to kind of go back and do a bridge to ETH. I mean, it's just a pain. And that's for people who are geeky enough to really do it and are passionate to go into it. So that will always have a constraint on how many people can adopt it. So what AI does, as what every evolution of tech does, is it takes out the friction, right? So what's happening now, it's still again in startup phase, different people doing it. You and I will just be talking in and telling your wallet what to do. So it'll be like, just like, book me this vacation, send 100,000 SUI tokens to XYZ and, convert, half of my ETH position into BTC. And why do I even still have ETH in the first place, right? You'll just be able to speak into it. And the AI will basically correspond and execute for you, as well as help you also keep track of your wallets, your access, and so on. So it's going to be the great enabler. the whole agentic movement, i.e. AI being expressed in AI agents. We're going to be living into a world of human and AI agents. We're going to have AI agents that are going to be founders, AI agents that are literally millionaires, eventually AI agents that are billionaires. That is all going to run on crypto. That's all going to run on blockchain. And if you think about this agentic economy, it's going to be a true digital economy that will eventually be bigger than most sovereign geographic economies because there is no borders, so to speak, right? An AI agent, couldn't care if you are in this part of the world versus the other. They're just solution-oriented, and they can jump through the hoops of friction that normally would be time zone. I have to sleep. You have a different kind of schedule. AI agents there 24/7, man. It's on the ball. It's not making any mistakes outside of the data that it's getting in. Of course, if that data is wrong, there'll be an error. So this is like just this great unleasher. And I can't express it enough that this is going to be one of the biggest things that emerges out of this intersection of digital assets, crypto, AI, and basically the future of innovation. Right?
Exciting stuff, Kay. And very interesting perspectives. Kay Van-Petersen, Managing Partner at Ascent Capital. Thank you very much, Kay.
Awesome. Great to be on.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.